righty. What's going on, everybody? Good morning. We're back. The boys are back.
Boys are back.
Back in town. I had to,
oh my gosh.
Had to do that.
Good
morning. I'm excited for this one. So Kevin and I have not met in person. Well, face to face yet. Been a lot of DMing. Kevin's been super grateful. He came and spoke to the Gun.io engineering leadership track community that we have going on. And I was like, man, we got to get you on the pod too. So really excited. He's here talking about his current endeavor. But first, before we dive in with Kevin, I want to give you a quick rundown of kind of what this thing is, right? Because we've been off for a few weeks. And then if you're tuning in, you're scrolling through LinkedIn aimlessly, and you're like, what the heck is this? Basically, Dan and I started this thing 4 years ago. I was telling this to Kevin backstage. And basically, we had another guy's name is Jake. He got too busy for us, which I get. Jake's busy constantly in the world. But so Dan and I kept at this. We've been at this for 4 years now. And really what we want to do is bring on founders and companies doing really cool shit that you haven't heard of yet, right? And so, we've had some amazing founders, amazing builders on the show already. And Kevin is definitely one of them as well. So very excited. So we have a bunch of our episodes. Honestly, I haven't said this publicly. If you're a VC company, I'd probably go run through our list of founders that we've already interviewed, see if anybody's interested. I don't know why we haven't pushed that.
I feel like some people have, and they're blowing their nose in $100 bills now.
Yeah, I think we've had like a handful over the last 2 years that I think are doing relatively well. So, yeah. So again, if you come on Unicorn Finders, you get a bunch of funding and make a bunch of money. There you go. Yeah. All right, cool. So Kevin, enough of that's me running my mouth. Let's give the people what they want. Quick background about you, the company. We'll go from there.
Sure. So the really short background on me. Current CEO of Hypermode. Before that was COO at Vercel for about 4 years. Went from a couple of $100K in revenue to pre-IPO scale with them. Incredibly fun journey. We talk all about that. Before that was at Domino Data Lab, machine learning ops platform. Before that was at Trade.io doing cloud integrations. And then at Neo4j, it's kind of like my career's been this full circle. It was a graph database company, but spent a bunch of time essentially modeling out neural networks, machine learning for graphs. And so it's nice kind of watching my universe all coalesce back into the same spot. Outside of work, I live just outside San Francisco in San Bruno. I try surfing most days. Weirdly enough, Hypermode has made that such that it's maybe once or twice a week, but we're trying to get back to it.
Wow.
Love it.
Pretty cool.
Yeah, it's a quick nutshell.
So, how long do you surf for? I think that's the question, right? Is it like golf, where you golf for 4 hours, or do you just go out there for like an hour or two? Like, what's kind of the frame on that?
If given the opportunity, I would surf for 4, 5, 6, 7 hours maybe stop for water in between. But I'm really lucky where there's a beach quite close to my house where in like 7 minutes door to beach, I can be in the parking lot, throwing on a wetsuit, surf for 45 minutes or an hour, come back, and like my day is all set up. Amazing. And I feel ready to tackle it.
How many waves do you get to tackle in like an hour?
The Bay Area is notorious for having, I don't call it low quality waves, but I would call it inconsistent waves.
Yeah.
And so you may have some days where you go out and you get 2 okay waves, or there's some days where you'll get 15 and you think you're Kelly Slater. But it varies so much day by day.
Yeah, I became a surfing expert watching the Olympics in Tahiti. Nice. So we'll talk more about
they really got what I look like. Imagine my face on John.
Yeah, I mean, I can see it, dude. Just in a barrel.
I can see it.
I live in Tampa, so we don't get those kind of waves. I grew up near Fort Lauderdale, and surfing in Fort Lauderdale is just not great. So I got to enjoy my first ever surfing when I went out to California for the first time. And it's really neat. And then I really saw it when we went to Hawaii. And I mean, it looks so cool. I've never tried it. Don't think it's probably in my life in the future to try, but I give people like you credit because it looks badass.
Yeah.
Nice. No, I'm like a big advocate for like surfing is for everyone. Yeah. Like it's all like how much you enjoy riding the wave, like even if it's not as athletic as you might hope.
What'd you do today? I hit 10 barrels, out by San Francisco. Dan, I hit a golf ball for 4 hours and I cursed,
yelled at it the entire time.
Had zero self-worth walking out. I mean, I know which one sounds more fun.
The dirty secret is I also play a lot of golf, or used to play a lot of golf. Camp Plant Juniors and all that stuff, but I'm now very bad. And so it's one of those things I don't know if you've lived this, where you get really good at something, and then life and maybe having kids gets in the way of it, and you come back to it, and your brain hasn't like made peace with the fact that you're terrible now. And so when I go out and play golf, it's like, oh, this beautiful little butter cut, and then it's in the ditch. I'm like, it breaks me.
Yeah, man, I get it. I get it.
All
right, Taylor, bring us back.
Yeah, Hypermode.
Yes.
So Kevin actually and I were chit-chatting backstage. He's like, well, if I had a podcast with my dudes, we'd go all over the place. And so far, Kevin, that was very close to going all over the place.
It was a commit.
So Hypermode, talk about it, dig into it. How can devs use it? I mean, ultimately, Dan and I live in the tech space, so most people who watch this are developers, are engineering leaders. I guess just pitch it real quick, talk about it, and then we'll just ask you some questions from there.
Yeah. So the primary problem, or why the company exists, is I think there are two big drivers. One is, generally speaking, I think the underlying primitives or modalities which we are developing software are changing. We now have this new underlying, again, I'll keep saying the word primitive, new underlying tool of large language models, and I think kind of the family of any sort of non-deterministic system. That's now a part of our developer workflow, where I'm going to reach for a persistence layer. I'm going to reach for this new translation layer of a large language model or an embedding model, as alongside all the other services that I'm using. And we wanted to start to build systems and tools and a workbench and a framework that made it more approachable for what I'll call the non-Silicon Valley developer, the average developer,
which is most of it.
Right?
Most people, yeah.
Right.
And just how do we help those folks build with good defaults? So with Hypermode, the perspective is, how do you start integrating models into your application? And it's a WebAssembly based framework that says, hey, here's a strong set of defaults of this is how to interact with the model. This is the way in which to capture the logic, the inputs, the outputs. And if you make no changes, it defaults to working really, really, really fast. And then for the expert developer, you want to tune it, you want to change the behaviors. It's easy to do. But 99% of the time, developers saying, hey, I've got a PM who is shouting at me about story points, and I just have to get something shipped today. How do I make it such that my product search is just a little bit better, that I can run a couple of multivariate tests to figure out a way of how do we serve better search recommendations, and just making that process much quicker and more painless. And so that's the thrust of Hypermode.
So I understood every word that you said, but for those that might be watching, I understood the word. I didn't understand.
Dan, I've missed you, man. I've missed your humor so
but
much.
For those that are watching that may not understand solely, right? We've got an incredibly smart audience here, but if they don't understand solely, talk to us a little bit about how it's been done in the past.
Yeah.
And then what your tool allows the process to go quicker, smoother, faster, whatever that might be.
Yeah. So there are two ways in which I think most companies, we'll call it the GPT boom, that they consumed models. One, at the elite end, you'd have a data science center of excellence where you'd have a bunch of really, really, really smart PhDs who spent a bunch of time in Python and writing in notebooks, working against things like SAS, if you're familiar. It's this amazing company back in
platform.
Yeah. Actually, I lived in Raleigh for a year.
Oh,
I was really close.
Yeah. The first ever person I placed was a SAS developer. So.
Oh, for real?
Oh, wow.
Awesome.
So in that era of antiquity, you would develop essentially these models, and then there was always this big gap between these weights, this algorithm that you've written, and actually putting that thing in production to do things called scoring, meaning receiving inputs, saying, okay, it looks like this, and pushing out outputs. And I worked at a company called Domino Data Lab, and their claim to fame was they made it really easy for you to drop those assets into a container, Docker container, and then just light that up as a service where you could, again, put that thing into production behind whatever your actual application was. That works pretty well, but it creates this schism between the application developer and the data science organization, where typically they have different constraints, different goals, and you end up with where you can feel it within the actual user experience, that, there were several architects building this house at the same time.
Gotcha.
The other way that this stuff gets consumed is just, models as a service. And again, like we're hearing that much more around foundational models today, but their tools, I mean, like Akismet is a great, if you have a WordPress website, you probably used Akismet, which is a model as a service for scoring spam of like, oh, this is a good post, a bad post. This is,
Gotcha.
fraudulent, whatever it may be. And developers just consume it as just APIs where they just plug it in, but they had no control or articulation over how that model actually works to fit my actual data set, my actual users.
Understood. Okay.
And so it's good.
I guess I'm always curious about the OG story, man. Like, what was like the light bulb moment? It's like, I gotta start Hypermode.
Oh,
like when you and your three buddies just surfing.
Yeah, no, yeah, right. You're sitting out, it's super barreled. No, I think this is one of like the myths of startups in general, where I think there's this, like Facebook style story that I think over long periods of time, and I will be guilty of this in a decade, when Hypermode's a big public company, and I'm like, oh, sitting in my dorm room at this college I never went to, and but the reality is, working at both Vercel and Domino and Neo, I really fell in love with this like awkward space between what I'll call like the business unit and the data. And so when we were thinking about, okay, if we know we want to start solving problems in that category, who's the stakeholder we want to serve? And then a lot of the actual product that we decided to build was born off of like going to those people and saying, hey, we think you have this problem. Is that true? And they're like, yep. Okay, what are you doing today? Would you be happy if we solved it in this way? And the product was kind of born out of, I think, much more what I'll call like developer empathy and feedback sessions, rather than me being really smart and being like, oh, I see the future. It looks like this.
Yeah. Talk to me about, so obviously it's a great product. This is a SaaS platform.
Yes. Yeah. It provides, so if you were to log on to Hypermode today, which everyone listening to this podcast should, basically what you end up doing is you get access to this framework, which will be very shortly open source, but also we provide infrastructure where if you start building, again, this is the strong defaults where, again, developers are forced to make a lot of decisions every day. And if we could take some of those decisions off their plate, we'd be really happy. And so we say, oh, there's model hosting here. There's infrastructure to deliver the actual functions. We'll automatically generate the APIs for you. Just bring your code. And so that's kind of the SaaS service that you end up signing up for. But again, very shortly, if you say, you know what, I don't want to give Kevin a dime, I just want to build locally, we're going to open source all of those components to allow you to actually have a really wonderful local experience and be able to like learn and iterate on your own. And then hopefully someday, deploy and deliver your application on us.
So that's ultimately the goal.
Yeah.
So,
okay, cool.
And I guess, and again, this is my third grade reading level, like we talked about backstage with the AI thing. So like, what specifically with AI does it help with, right? Because when I think AI, like there's so much in AI, right? I've had a bunch of AI experts come in and train our sales teams. We've talked about NLP and computer vision and, all this type of stuff. So how does this fit in with all that?
Oh yeah.
And if you've explained that, I'm sorry. Like I said, third grade reading level.
No. I think it's actually, Ed, I've been talking a lot about this over the last week. Anton from Chroma had this great like tweet thread where I'd gone to dinner with him, and he had presented this, how to think about AI applications. He had these really great reference points of his primary complaint was that we in the industry are wrapping ourselves up with jargon and words and silliness that are relatively exclusionary, where the average developer or, the CEO who's non-technical is just, I have no idea, just all these smart people shouting words at me. And so to try and maybe like in a nod to a lot of the stuff that he's been talking about, the big difference between, pre-AI and post-AI worlds is historically applications have been what we call deterministic, meaning you say, add these two numbers together, and then you ask it a little bit later, what is X? It's like X is 2. What's really difficult about building with models, or that we call non-deterministic systems, is they are not necessarily going to give you the same result despite the same inputs. And so if I say, what is the weather today? A language model will make up a response, like literally will make up a response.
Right.
Like, okay, I guessed on what the things Kevin was trying to ask about. The weather's going to be hot. And I ask it again immediately after. It says the weather's going to be warm. And then ask it again, and it says the weather's going to be blue. It hallucinates. And so what's really difficult about that is when you chain together a series of models, the cone of what might come out the other end gets really, really, really broad. And what we found is that developers need tools that allow them to really quickly try a bunch of different combinations of prompt or infrastructure or models to then figure out how do we get the right results out the other end of those models, of all of those, non-deterministic inputs and outputs. And so, yeah.
No, I think that makes sense. I think so. So this helps speed up, maybe, or experiment faster with whatever model you're trying to work within. Is that kind of correct?
Yeah, it's like 80% of building with models is the same work every single time. We're wiring up, how do I connect to my data? How do I connect to the model? How do I measure the inputs and outputs? And we just say, hey, like, we'll do that part for you. You just show up and bring your logic of, well, I want to ask a robot this, and then I want to take what the robot says and give it to this, and then I want to take what that robot says and give it to that. And at the end of it, I really want to go and make sure that that is a recommendation, and I feed that back into my actual, e-commerce website. And so we make it really, really easy for the 80% of non-differentiating, really, really, really heavy lifting, and say, hey, that's all done for you. You just kind of describe the conceptual problems that you want to solve, and we take care of the rest.
Okay. How much? There's no such thing as a traditional company, right? But bear with me for this example.
I'm ready. Let's go.
And you can use whatever your idea of this is. For a traditional company, you will just say a relatively, a $250 million e-commerce company, right? How much time is this saving them? How much money could this potentially save them? I guess my question is, like, how big of a lift is this on a daily, weekly, monthly, yearly basis for software development teams? And how much time could we potentially save, and ergo save money for businesses?
No, I also love the very casual, like, Kevin, like, please do the value engineering of Hypermode.
Yeah,
really help me
on the spot.
No,
I love it. I love it. It's great.
Again, I understand, right? And you and I could whiteboard this together, but for the average listener, you know what I mean? Yeah. Like, I'm thinking of them in this example, Kevin.
Yeah. So there I think two classes within this. One of which is I am, a Nike-sized business, an Under Armour-sized business. I've likely hired out a team of really, 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 really smart data scientists who are going to say things like, "Oh, I'm building, a two towers model. I'm going to, do nearest neighbor." They like shout big science words.
Yeah, big science words. Yeah,
big science words.
Photosynthesis.
Exactly, shouting photosynthesis. And CIO was like, yes. The mitochondria is the powerhouse of the cell.
Everybody knows that. Yeah.
And so what ends up happening is you end up with this, again, data science center of excellence, and they will have a large number of projects to hack through. And you might be spending 300, 400K loaded cost per data scientist. And you'll end up saying, okay, each iteration on our recommendation system probably takes 3 months. And so you kind of back into the math there, say, okay, so each iteration is costing me, again, we'll do fast, simple math, 500K.
Sure.
And what's hard, and this is, I think, the thing that is really interesting about building with models and building non-deterministic systems, is it is like an emergent practice, meaning you may try 10 different things only to find out the third iteration was the best one. But you need the ability to actually flip through all the different permutations of temperatures and weights and methods. And so you might burn 500K and not actually improve your recommendations. I mean, I think Netflix did the recommendation prize where they offered, I think it was $1 million or $5 million to anyone who can improve their recommendation algorithm. And so when teams are building with Hypermode, you're compressing those iteration cycles from, I'll call it months into days. And because again, like the wiring is all handled for you, so you have this great framework for plugging in and out the different models, the different logic pieces. And the thing that I am most excited about is we've taken the translation layer from where the data science organization would often sit with either developers in the business unit or the business stakeholders in the business unit, say, hey, what we're trying to do is get people to watch more movies on Netflix. And there's always a little bit of this like evil genie effect where they say, okay, we know that if we make, every image bright neon orange, people click on them more often. And you end up with moving a singular metric in a good direction, but the accurate experience gets a lot worse. With Hypermode, we've transitioned the data science out of the data science organization and have handed it to the developer, where the developer has this intimate understanding of like, okay, this is the user experience we're trying to create. And I know that like my goal is to build viewers who resubscribe, who continue to spend time on the platform. And so they're designing an experiment that is matching that macro goal rather than having to kind of throw requirements over the wall to a team of mathematicians who are trying to move a singular metric up or down. And so
this theoretic. Oh, go ahead. I was going to say, so this theoretically could allow a business to move quicker, do better decision making without having to build out massive data science teams, which for a lot of companies, I mean,
out of reach.
Here in Tampa, we're just never there, right? And we probably will never get there in terms of what that looks like.
And
but this allows you to make those better decisions without necessarily needing these massive teams. Or if you have a big team already, this doesn't necessarily take their job. It allows them to focus on bigger, more complex issues, right?
Exactly.
Yeah. Kevin, I came up with your marketing tagline.
Let's go.
Making your data analyst data scientist. There you go.
Ooh, no.
Sold.
No. So how are you guys gonna make, as we kind of wrap up here? I do have a hard stop in 7 minutes. Yeah. How do you guys make money? Is it going to be like per model, per? I mean, because I learned about tokens yesterday from my guy Jerome. So I learned about that. That's crazy. I didn't know there's tokens too in AI.
Yeah, it's like Chuck E. Cheese, real life Chuck E. Cheese.
Yeah, literally, I said Frankie's fun part.
Yeah,
I said Frankie's fun part on the training. He was like, "What is that?" I was like, "Never mind. It's like Chuck E. Cheese."
Frankie's Fun Park.
That was a
buddy. That sounds like a place that should be shut down. It just, I don't know about Frankie, but
no, it's just like Chuck E. Cheese, go kart. Anyways, and I digress. Yeah. Kevin, how do you guys make money?
Apparently, we're gonna open a carnival. No, so I'm regards Hypermode or not, I am such an advocate of simple pricing, and so what we're going to be doing for developers is, hey, you pay per the number of folks who are going to be building with Hypermode, and we give you essentially infrastructure capacity, and then when you use more than that allotted infrastructure capacity, you literally pay per compute cycle. We call them gigabyte hours, so think of like serverless functions. But we try to make it as easy as possible for the developer to build intuition about, okay, I'm building this thing. It's going to be online this many hours. It's going to do these sorts of things. Oh, that'll cost me $43 a month. One of the things I really dislike about where AI in general is moving is people tend to have very poor intuition for tokens. And when you say, oh, I've given you 1 million tokens, you have no idea if that is a lot of stuff or a little stuff.
Correct. Yeah.
And so we were trying to move away from that sort of modality and say, okay, like this is intelligible. Treat it like the rest of your infrastructure. You are very used to buying things like AWS, so like Azure. Here's how to consume that, our product in the same capacity.
Yeah, I think I get 250 tokens on Chat GPT free. Question for you. This is a broader question. Mm-hmm. Talk to me about compute, right? Obviously, AI has brought about a lot of new conversations with GPUs, the amount of compute that's happening, the speed in which we can create chips and everything else. Everybody seems to want to play in the space of AI. There's huge, investments made in AI. NVIDIA's one of the I guess up until maybe if we had this conversation 2 weeks ago, it would have been easier to say one of the fastest growing stocks in the world, right?
Yeah.
Talk to me a big picture about compute and the cost associated with that. If a company's like, hey, we want to do more in the space of AI, but we're getting very concerned about the cost of compute on top of everything else in IT, which is just exploded in cost over the last 2 decades.
I think what we're seeing is there's this big delta between what I would call like the non-technical media. Sounds like a really loaded word, like journalists who are talking about the thing versus practitioners, where if you were building your own foundational model and you're trying to go and compete with OpenAI and Gemini or any of these other like large models, yes, you have a deep concern over getting enough access to GPUs.
Yeah.
If you are building an application that faces users, there is an 80-20 solution for you where you can use a small, either CPU bound or very small. It could be GPU bound model, but like could run on your gaming computer in your house and serve thousands and thousands of users. We saw this with one of our customers, Hashnode, where they were using OpenAI to do all of their spam detection. They said, hey, this is really great, but it's kind of expensive when we think about it over long periods of time. And when they ended up looking at doing was using, there's a model called Distilbert. It's a little tiny language model, and we were able to improve their spam detection rates. And also it costs 30 cents a month to train and less than that to run. And so there's a universe of, you can get most of the value out of language models and out of AI using small, cheap models. And yes, someday Google and OpenAI and all these folks will solve, with a new Transformer plus that will like reduce our demands for GPUs. But we could still today, as like the general public, build really cool stuff that doesn't require gobs and gobs of compute. I know we've got two more.
I appreciate that perspective. As you could probably imagine, I've not priced out building an AI model for myself yet, but I'm getting there.
So we'll do that this weekend.
Yeah, trying to spend more time golfing and less time my job. But we'll talk about that later. Just kidding, Baco. It's a joke. I'll be here.
No, it's the model we built that will do parts of your job.
Yeah, it'll allow me to do things better. Yeah.
Awesome. I don't know. I'm turning blurry, but well, Kevin, this was great, man. This was awesome. So how can people find you? How can people reach out to you? What's the best way to ask you questions on Hypermode?
So Twitter at Kevin Van Gundy. That dates me. X.com at Kevin Van Gundy, or just Hypermode. Contact us. That goes to me these days. Shoot me a note. Be very happy to help you. Even if it's just I want to build some AI stuff and I don't know where to start. Yeah. I'm your guy. Yeah. Happy to help.
Awesome.
Hell yeah.
Sweet. Cool. Well, y'all, thank you again.
That was really cool.
That was cool.
I thought I was getting like an aneurysm, and then you said something. I was like, man, this is it.
I've been watching the ticker. We've had quite a few people tune in. So thank y'all so much for tuning in today. It really means a lot. Actually, probably one of our most viewed episodes in a long time. Awesome. So again, thank y'all for tuning in. We appreciate it. Go connect with Kevin. Tell me you heard from Unicorn Finders. Kevin, thank you, my friend. We appreciate it. Stay on real quick so we can say bye to you backstage. Y'all have a great one. We're back next Thursday. Y'all have a good one. Peace.
Thank you.